Hey, welcome to CineMike. For this episode I'm going to review The Dark Tower, which is adapted from the Dark Tower series of 8 books written by Stephen King, and has a huge fan following, massively successful series, and for many years studios have been trying to figure out how to bring these books onto the big screen. But no one's been able to crack the code. And a lot of fans of the book would argue it's because the series is maybe too complicated to just put into one film. I've heard some people suggest that it might work better as a mini-series. But here we are. They finally did it. The general impression I got about people's attitude towards this movie is that they were either anxiously hopeful or downright doubtful about the film. And then you of course have those people that never read the books who are just like, what's this? But for the fans, it sounds like they've been increasingly losing faith with this movie, especially when news broke about how long it is, the runtime. Only 95 minutes. And as most of us know in the film business, when a movie is edited down that short, it usually indicates that the studio didn't have a lot of confidence in it being a regular feature length, which is 120 minutes. Then there was the studio not having early screenings for critics, which is usually a big part of the publicity for films, especially when the studio wants to show off something they're proud of. But they were withholding this one, and the first reviews for it only started coming out maybe a day before the movie's release. Now the reviews have come out, and they're not good. The movie right now currently holds, I think, a 17% on Rotten Tomatoes, and critics are trashing the movie. So this only seems to feed into all the fears that these fans have had. So do I agree with the critics, or do I think they're being too harsh? Well, first off, I have to admit that I never read the books. I'm loosely familiar with them, but most of what I know was fed to me by people that have read them, and I've heard their concerns and criticisms. And one of the things that they don't like is that this movie is like a continuation of the books. It's not a direct adaptation of the books, apparently. And you can feel that in the story. It feels like they're not really taking a lot of time to acclimate new viewers to this universe. It feels like they're treating it kind of like, oh yeah, you know this, we don't really need to go into this mythology and how these worlds work. They kind of give you a crash course in all the basics of everything. There is a kid who has the shine, then it gives him the ability to be sensitive to these interdimensional realms and have some forms of telepathy. So does this sound like any other movies that you might know?
She called it shining. Not things that anyone can notice, but things that people who shine can see.
So shining, right? Huh? Also look at the framed picture from The Dark Tower here. It's the Overlook Hotel from Stanley Kubrick's adaptation of The Shining. So this seems to be teasing a shared universe. And he, in his dreams, is seeing images of the gunslinger, Roland, and the man in black, Walter, from the all-world realm, which has 3 different regions, the in-world, mid-world, and in-world. And at the center of this rests the tower that apparently is keeping all of the evil outside of these realms of different dimensions. And if this tower was to fall, then suddenly darkness would sweep through the universe. And basically it's the gunslinger's sworn duty to protect this tower, but they're losing the war. And Walter, who is this sorcerer or whatever, for whatever reason, wants to bring about the apocalypse. And this kid is the key. Now the cast. With what they had to work with, I think they did a good job. Idris Elba plays Roland, the last gunslinger. And he has a commanding presence. He's great. He elevates the material. I mean, he doesn't have a lot to work with, but he still instills this verisimilitude in everything he does. He just makes his characters relatable, and you can empathize with him. And I feel like he's bringing like this weight into the movie that was probably carried over from doing a lot of research for the story. I'm sure he did the reading of all the books. It feels like all of that is in there, but the story doesn't grant him enough opportunities to show what he's got. It feels like Roland should have been more at the center of the story than he was. He doesn't even appear until at the very end of the first act, so I feel like he was really reduced and minimized. Most of the movie focuses on Jake's character, who's played by Tom Taylor. And honestly, the kid's a good actor. I think that he was convincing in everything he did. And then you have Matthew McConaughey playing Walter, the man in black. And I think he did okay too. He was fine. He wasn't, great necessarily, because the character is really one-dimensional. We didn't ever really get to know a lot about him. We just know he's evil, and he's a sorcerer, and he has powers, and he wants to bring about the apocalypse for some unknown reason. But yeah, other than that, not much. There's not much to work with, and that's what I feel bad about for the actors. But they try. They really do. They do the best they can. The problem is that the movie has a lot going on, and the storytelling doesn't really make an effort to acclimate us to it all. Like, there's these creatures that are helping out Walter, and I don't know what the hell they are. I know that they wear flesh over them to disguise themselves to look, like humans, but are they demons? Like, what are they? I have no idea. They never took the time to really establish that. And there's just a lot of things like that in this movie. Some of the only backstory that we get is we see like a brief glimpse into Roland's father getting killed through a nightmare that Jake is having, but that's about all we get. I don't really know what this world was prior to this like post-apocalyptic scenario. We see that there's abandoned theme parks and buildings. So I guess it used to be more like Earth at one time, but I don't know much about it. Like, I know that the gunslingers used to be in mass numbers. So what was that like? I mean, what was the world like before? I don't know. I just have so many questions that they didn't even bother to try to answer. One of the many things that is left unclear is if Roland is a human. I'm sure that fans of the book know the answer to this, but the movie didn't really address it. We see that he gets injured like a human, he can get infections like a human, he can get treated at a hospital by doctors and they can't tell the difference, and yet he can perform superhuman feats with gunslinging, and he's also put through situations that would kill a normal person, like falling off a building and exploding through a speeding bus, for example. So what are his abilities? And what are his limitations? They're just speeding through things. They're speeding through exposition. I mean, some movies give you too much exposition. This one gives you way too little. The movie just doesn't make a lot of time for depth or real character development because it's trying to speed through plot points. That's pretty much all this narrative is just going from one point to the next. It's missing all of that world building. So it's very shallow in that way, and because they're not focusing on the grander picture of everything, and they're only focusing on plot points, it plays kind of generically for me. And honestly, I can see similarities in movies like The Last Action Hero, which is about a child that is always fantasizing about this film universe, and he crosses over into it, and later he pulls his hero, his idol, out of that universe into New York City, and they have the whole fish out of water thing, where they're playing up that he doesn't understand how the world works. That all happens in this, because Jake, at one point, pulls Roland into our world, and, he drinks Coca-Cola, product placement, and is kind of experiencing things. It just feels, very kind of generic. And, it'd be one thing if there's a lot of action to hold your interest, but there's not really that much action either. I mean, there's a couple little sequences here and there, but most of the action doesn't even kick into the third act. And some of that stuff is okay, it just feels a little rushed. The whole finale feels very rushed. Like, we're just suddenly like, oh, we're doing this now? Oh, this is happening already? Okay. And then it's over. It just feels like there was a lot of potential there that they didn't realize. Now apparently the studio has plans to make The Dark Tower into a TV series. Now I can see this as being both a good and a bad thing. A good thing because, maybe the fans were right to begin with. This would have perhaps worked better as a TV miniseries. The universe is so big that it's hard to contain into one single feature film, especially when it's 90 minutes. But the bad side to this is that they didn't do a very good job of laying down the groundwork for this universe. How is the movie a good starting off point for a TV series? And also the critics have spoken. They really didn't like it. And reviews are starting to come in for fans also. IMDb, I believe, has a 6 out of 10 right now. So it doesn't sound like this is really the best start to try to think of expanding the universe. So this whole thing might fall apart. And I don't know how much money the studio might lose because of that. Now, I will say that I do think that the critics were a little harsh on the movie. I don't think the movie's awful. I mean, maybe fans of the books will feel it's awful. It wasn't great, but it also wasn't terrible. For me, it was somewhere in the middle. It was fine. It did its job, I guess, of being an action film with fantasy and sci-fi elements. It never blew me away, but I never, became so frustrated that I wanted to leave the theater either. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the very best that this particular movie could be for me, I would give The Dark Tower a 6.5. And I think that about covers it. If you enjoyed this video, then please click like, and feel free to leave a comment below. Tell me if you agree or disagree, and I also welcome you to subscribe to my channel. And also you can now follow me on Twitter at CineMike Nerd. So, until next time, This is Mike, signing off.